I'd like to introduce our next panel, consisting of several leaders from banking and insurance industries. Moderating this session will be Liesel van Ast, Deputy Head of UNEP FI. Whilst the panelists take to the stage, as I invite them on now, I'd like to highlight who they are. We have Jean-François Chalifoux from Beneva, Canada. They are a member of the Principles for Sustainable Insurance. We have Patty Karuaihe-Martin, NamibRe, from Namibia. Patty is co-chair of our Global Steering Committee, UNEP FI's main governance body. NamibRe are also PSI signatories. Patrick Odier, Lombard Odier Group, and chair of Building Bridges. Lombard Odier are a Principles for Responsible Banking signatory, and Patrick, of course, also chairs Building Bridges. Ralph Opara, Axis Bank. Axis Bank are founding signatories to the Principles for Responsible Banking. Liesel, over to you.
Thank you, Mustafa, and welcome everyone. Clearly responsible banking and sustainable insurance have a critical role to play in financing for sustainable development. And there's nothing more than climate change, inequality, nature loss, more important to address through financing. And with the Principles for Responsible Banking and Principles for Sustainable Insurance, we have global frameworks for the banking and insurance industries to support the transition to a just, sustainable, resilient economy. So I think we can dive straight in today. I would like to hear from each of you as leaders in sustainable finance. Could you just explain why is sustainability important to you and how are you driving change through your actions? I think, Patty, please, over to you.
Thank you so much, Liesel. Yes, sustainable insurance or sustainable finance is absolutely key, and especially taking into account where I'm coming as a reinsurer. That is, if we, as in the insurance sector, do not start to align with the sustainable insurance or sustainable banking, we will definitely be caught up. We have heard today quite a lot of times as to why this should be happening, that it is a must. We don't have much more time, and taking into account the different perils that are increasing, and also taking into account where I'm coming from Africa. It's there. The perils are happening so often that we in the insurance space and reinsurance space, if we don't put in measures, we will definitely become uninsurable. We will be without our future or our businesses. So what do I do as a responsible citizen? What we have done from the African context, we have started with an initiative called the Nairobi Declaration, which is also, we initially started it in collaboration with the UNEP FI, PSI 4th African Initiative, where 8 of us reinsurance founders came together and we started with this initiative of working with the UNEP FI. And today we can proudly say in over 5 years, we've grown to 225 insurance, reinsurers, and intermediaries. Yeah.
Thanks, Patty. Patrick, you work in a very different market. So how do you see the sustainable finance agenda and what are you doing?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I think first and foremost, we have engaged into sustainable finance and investing as a fiduciary duty to our clients. That's probably the simplest way to say it. We consider that the transformation of industries worldwide, the transformation of the global economic model is ongoing, and that we have to understand its consequences, not only from a risk point of view, but also from an opportunity point of view. Both sides, of course, do have an impact, a direct impact on the portfolios of our clients, as we do act as investment managers and advisors. And in this respect, we're as interested in benefiting from these innovative trends that are taking place to transform whatever whatever sector, whatever industry today, as we are interested in making sure we don't get portfolios that are perhaps subject to a future stranded asset. So that's the reason why we engaged. And the way we've done that is by trying to define not what is a good or a bad industry or what is a good or a bad company, and trying to avoid the typical taxonomy pitfalls, but to try to define very early in our activities and developments the notion of transition. How do you measure the journey that the sector has to go through, and how do you measure vis-a-vis or compared to this sectorial journey, how do you measure the performance of individual companies you want to overweight or to underweight? And I'm saying this because I just want to answer the question of excluding immediately. Overweighting and perhaps underweighting is probably, to our knowledge, the best way to encourage capital to flow in the right direction and accelerate the transition. We have been doing that by not only analyzing the models, but also developing methodologies alongside the TSFD portfolio alignment team. We have developed some measurement that would contribute to better understand the contribution of each companies we wanted to choose in the portfolio in terms of elevation or reducing temperature. And I think this has led us to be probably at the forefront of measuring impact of our approach a bit differently from the rest of the world. And this is also why Switzerland has actually, not because of us only, but has also introduced this notion of Swiss score, which differentiates itself quite pragmatically from the very theoretical usual taxonomies, i.e. we are one of the only countries that, I think, one of the only countries that measures really the progression of the sustainability of the portfolios. And the reason why we want to do that is to offer a tool to our peers, to the industry, so that they can allocate their portfolio in the right direction.
Thank you, Patrick. And transition and impact, of course, critical and also an important part of implementing the principles for responsible banking. So, Rolf, from Access Bank's point of view, how have you been driving action and why?
Okay, thank you for that. At Access Bank, we see sustainability as a moral right and a moral obligation in terms of influencing the environment around us. As the largest bank in Nigeria and a leading financial institution in Africa, we believe that we have the necessary influence to effect change. Typically, what we've done is, of course, adopt the principles in responsible banking as a framework towards repurposing our portfolio towards creating sustainability-linked loans that can support renewable energy, inclusion, and green finance. As you know, at Access Bank, we are the first bank to issue a CBI-certified green bond, which was fully subscribed, with the proceeds going into flood prevention controls and renewable energy and inclusion. Also, part of those proceeds went into developing mass transit that would, of course, reduce carbon emissions. At the bank, also, we look at inclusion. And women, as we know, are very critical to sustainable development, but however, they face significant challenges in accessing finance. So through our W initiatives, we've been able to allocate $1 billion in supporting over 4,700 women-owned businesses, helping them in terms of capacity buildings, trainings, supporting their businesses, along with other SMEs in that space. So that is something we do. And then, of course, we are big in terms of technology, in trying to use technology to get the unbanked, on the less financially intermediated people, and trying to develop products and credit schemes that would bring them back into the financial system. So these are some of the things that we do around ensuring sustainability within our environment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It's very, very different challenges to Canada. So please, Jean-François, as an insurance company in Canada, how do you see sustainability as a signatory to the PSI since last year?
Yeah, thank you, Liesel. First of all, why is sustainability important for us? I have to go back in time. Beneva was created actually in 2020. It's a fairly new organization. It's been created with the coming together of two mid-sized mutuals who are dating back to the 1940s. And interestingly enough, one of the two founding company. It was actually civil servants who decided to create a fund so that upon their death, the wives and the orphans didn't have to piggyback in the next egg in order to be able to afford the funeral costs. On the other side, one of the two original companies, it was actually blue-collar workers who decided to group together so that they could have a better access in 1944 to healthcare and medicines. So you can see that sustainable growth and social innovations are part of our DNA. Our founders were really people who had a thirst for equity and social justice. So today, obviously, things are very different. Nevertheless, in Canada, as a leading insurance company on both life and non-life business, we are witnessing in 2024 alone the worst year on record in terms of insured losses due to climatic events. We had 4 major events this past summer: wildfires in Western Canada, record hailstorms in Calgary. We had torrential rains in Toronto with the downtown core being flooded by the river. And we had Hurricane Debbie hitting Quebec last August. That represents a total of 200,000 claims opened, over $5 billion US dollars in losses, in insured losses, making it the worst year on record. It's actually, so $5 billion, to give you an idea, it's actually 400% over the average of the last 20 years. And the previous record for Canada in terms of catastrophic losses due to natural disasters was 2023 at $2 billion US. So you can really see something changing in our country. And that's why we need to set the tone from the top. I really do believe that profits, short-term profits at the expense of everything else is no longer acceptable. We need to step up, take action now, so that future generations live in a better world.
Thank you. Current and future generations, of course, need a sustainable, resilient economy and healthy planet. You mentioned very much the risk side of the equation. Patrick, you mentioned opportunities. How do you see, we've had some noting some of the headwinds we're facing in certain jurisdictions over the coming years. How do you see the role of responsible banking in helping to drive a shift in the finance industry, and why is it important to continue that shift?
Yes, we heard it. We heard it in the introductory comments. We, as a financial sector as a whole, we probably have a role to play vis-a-vis governing bodies, governments, in order to make sure that the policies do, nevertheless, whatever the votes and the elections are, go in the right direction. I think, as I said this morning in another session, I think the financial sector should project itself for the long term and not get distracted by, I would say, political deviation, if I may say this. And I think in this respect, the good news, and we heard it from science, we heard it from industry, we heard it from Christiana as well. I mean, the journey is on. And I think this is one more reason to make sure that the financial sector, which acts, if you wish, somehow as a messenger, good news or bad news, of what has been decided, that gets together and focuses on what are still the obstacles that do make the pace too slow. But the pace is only too slow if it is to benefit from opportunities that will be profitable at the end, not only from a planetary point of view, but first and foremost from a financial portfolio point of view. If the financial sector can do something, is to make sure that it demonstrates that investing sustainably brings positive financial returns to the investors. And I think this is now demonstrable, and I think we can do it in a better way, and we will be able to do it in a better way if we can foster not only the right tools, but also the right data production and publication. That's why, for instance, in this country, we are trying to encourage publication of financial, of course, but also non-financial data in a way that is attractive rather than repulsive, if I may say. We don't need to have the thousands of data points that are being asked by other jurisdictions here to make sure that we are or not on the right track when it comes to the transitioning that you need to see in an investment that you want to make. We need to have a few of those only, and we need to focus on those few and make sure that policy understand that and encourages that pragmatism in approaching the production of data. That's one example. Same thing for greenwashing. Greenwashing is an issue that has nothing to do in particular with the financial sector. Greenwashing can be found at every level. What is important is to realize that the more transparency will be fostered, the less greenwashing there will be. So let's focus on transparency and the right one. And final point, I think that the transparency and data availability will have also another fantastic impact, is that it will help through the divulgation of what is important into the procurement chain, the value chain of the companies that you want to invest in, all the positive and the negatives that a company is experiencing in its production, and it will then accelerate not only the financial sector impact in investing in those companies, but first and foremost the transformation of those companies that suddenly will be facing the reality of having data on about how and what they do much more clearer to the entire stakeholder community, including employees, including regulators, shareholders, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, you know, the financial sector can encourage, quite simply, if I may say, this trend to accelerate, and it is an issue of pace and transparency.
Thank you. I mean, the transformation, of course, has many facets, and data as being one, and transparency one aspect of helping to facilitate it. So, Jean-François, from Beneva's point of view, how do you determine your sustainability priorities, and how does becoming a PSI signatory and promoting a sustainable insurance market fit in with that?
Well, first of all, we have been in a long-standing relationship with PRI. SSQ Insurance, one of the two founding companies, was the first insurance company in Canada to be a signatory of UNPRI. So it was totally natural to us. It was a no-brainer a couple of years ago when we established our sustainability priorities to join PSI. We 2 years ago set our ambition to become net zero by 2040 on our operations and investments, and on everything else by 2050. So that's a really ambitious goal for an insurance company. And also, we try the best we can to tie our priorities to our strategic ambition and strategic targets. And for us, it's very important as a purpose-led organization, as a mutual insurance company with members who are actually customers and owners, to stay connected with our members. And as such, all of our executives, including myself, we need to make a certain number of contacts with each of our, with 10 or 12 customers every year to stay close, understand, and obtain insights from them. So it was totally natural to me when Hurricane Debbie hit Quebec on August 9th, a few weeks after the event. I actually went on the field with claims appraisers. I wanted to meet the people who are actually going through hard times. I wanted to understand what they were going through, make observation, listen to their insights. Maybe they would make me some recommendations. And it was a very enlightening experience for me. I have a busy agenda, trust me, so taking one day to travel on the road and get into people's basement, that required a little bit of gymnastics, but it was enlightening. And especially I met with one businesswoman. She was an entrepreneur. She's an entrepreneur, owner of a hair salon, hair parlor, and nail spa. And she was totally devastated. And it was not like, it was 3 weeks after the event. So she knew by then that she would be compensated financially for her loss. But she had been going through a massive renovation with her husband of her business that lasted over 12 months. She didn't know if she would have the energy again to start over. She had suddenly a few employees, mothers, without income. She didn't know if they would come back or how to compensate them. She was anxious that we would not renew our contracts that would increase the rates or reduce coverage. And she was crying. And that made me think a lot. It's not just the insurance business. It's one thing. The insurance business will survive climate change. But will the economy survive climate change? And that, to me, was a clear example that we need to act now. I also realized during those visits that we're doing it wrong in the insurance industry, and that includes Beneva. We're compensating people for their loss, but we're building back exactly the same as it is originally built. We're using the same materials, the same finishes, and we need to build back better. And this is why Beneva is currently looking into its policy wordings and contracts so that we can build back better, so that the homes are more resilient. So this is really what we're trying to do, is to connect with members and our willingness and determination to build a more resilient society to influence the way we do business.
Thank you. Well, in many ways, insurance is at the front line of resilience, I think, and of course in Africa it plays a critical role, and also sub-Saharan Africa being very exposed to the physical impacts of climate change. So, Patty, as well as being the co-chair of UNEP FI's Global Steering Committee, you're also president of the African Insurance Organization. Sorry. How do you see the role of UNEP and the principles for sustainable insurance, and for you, for your company, driving sustainability in the insurance industry in the African market?
Thank you, Liesel. Yes, I've got quite a few hats that I always put on, but it's all aligning to one goal, and for us to achieve a sustainable insurance sector. So yes, as a president of African Insurance Organization, I have taken a few years ago, before I even became president, the initiative, and that's why we started with the Nairobi Declaration and a few other initiatives, where we started with making sure that at each and every platform that we are having, such as our conferences, that we do have the sustainable journey as a topic. And we were actually so fortunate that for the past 2 or 3 years, it has, in some instances, it has been the overall concept of the conference. So we have created quite huge awareness, because that was the first thing where everyone will ask you, from your board members will ask you, where does this fit into the scope of things? So it's a journey where you, when I started the journey in my own company, I had to convince my board members as to why we have to go on to this sustainable journey, why it has to be part of your strategic intent, how to bring in the SDGs, and it was a whole, but once you have created the awareness and created what it's for, it has been acceptable, and I think that's where you can see the takeoff, where we have the NDSI grown from 8 members, founding members, to over 225, and I think we are currently the second biggest body after the African Insurance Organization. And I think what we do is at the AIO, which is African Insurance Organization, we make sure that the members understand why we should be on this journey. And like I've explained, it's actually becoming easier to explain it and to get everyone on board because of the current, that they are seeing the perils, they are seeing the floods happening, they are seeing the drought. And it's also, this morning Inge has mentioned that it is, the science say it is there, the science is proven that it's going to just get worse, and we have to do something about it. So yes, I think from that perspective, and I think also taking into account that if you take Africa, countries such as Kenya currently, and the Horn of Africa, which is Ethiopia, Namibia, we're all experiencing drought, and our GDPs obviously are feeling it, and by 2030, we're going to continue experiencing up to 30% of our GDP being lost to such perils. So it is, we have to be on the sustainable journey. We have to make the impact, and there's no better way than using the current platforms to make sure that the awareness is created and that everyone knows why they need to be on the sustainable journey.
Thanks, Patty. And of course, since the PSI was launched in 2012, it's had quite some years of the journey and of defining what that means for sustainable insurance. For banking, the Principles for Responsible Banking launched in 2019. The PRB implementation journey released last month defines what that journey looks like and supports setting targets, delivering targets, transition planning, and so on. So Rolf, as a long-standing member of UNEP FI and also a founding signatory to the Principles for Responsible Banking, how have you seen the framework support your bank in transitioning your portfolios for sustainable development, and of course, specifically your strategic priorities on climate change and financial inclusion?
Okay, thank you for that. I would say that it's allowed us to repurpose our portfolio, to look at sectors that we would never have looked at before. And just to buttress what Patrick said, yes, we are messengers, so to speak, and it's good to make profit, but you have to realize that our fortunes as a bank is tied to the communities and the environments that we serve. So we have to ensure that the well-being of the society is healthy, and that has enabled us to repurpose our loan portfolio towards those projects. So looking at transitioning to sectors around renewable energies, green financing, and inclusion is very critical. Those are areas we would not have looked at maybe 15, 20 years ago. So with these principles, it has created a framework where we can look at those sectors, deploy funding to it, and ensure that we build up the societies around us in such a way that they themselves are also transitioning towards green energy, decarbonization effects, and dealing with climate resilient solutions. Of note is that technology plays a very critical role for us. Through our African FinTech Foundries, we've been able to create technology solutions that would help the unbanked or the otherwise less intermediated people towards getting into the sector. Of recently, we created a Sustainable Finance Accelerator that creates a platform that gets entrepreneurs with ideas and solutions towards sustainable projects towards the room, giving them capacity building, and of course, providing financing to help such solutions take effect within the society. So those are some of the things we're doing based on the framework of PRB.
Thank you. I mean, working on solutions and delivering solutions, I think it seems it takes working with different stakeholders to really deliver those, also especially with technology and creating the enabling environment. So I think it would be good to hear more about how collaboration works in practice. So maybe starting with Patty, who are the key stakeholders that the insurance industry can work with to really deepen sustainability and to drive ambition and change across the industry?
Yes, for me, that's always a key concept I drive to say that collaboration is key. And different partners definitely need to come on board, because otherwise we'll be remaining in our solos and we will not achieve much. And I think a good collaboration is today where we're seeing Building Bridges and UNEP FI forming that partnership and having this event. That's already a key initiative where you're bringing the financial sector together and for different purposes. But when you go back to the real life or the economic reality, the insurance sector and the banking sector need to work closer together. Because what I have seen is that when you do especially sustainable banking or certain innovation, you will require the products to be insured. So I think that's already an area where we can work closer together. And ourselves as the insurance sector, the reinsurance sector, then together with our regulators, our governments, the political will is very important. And I've heard it today quite a number of times that the political will is definite, or the political, whatever's happening in the politics is impacting a lot on what we want to do. It's even most probably pulling us a bit back. So it is time for us as the insurance sector, being the risk managers, risk carriers, and also investors, to definitely come on board and put make sure that we collaborate and work closer together, bring in, especially like I've mentioned earlier, the regulator is very important in this whole space, because the sustainable finance sector need a bit of a push from the regulator, but we also need to inform the regulator as to how they can play a role. And I think some countries have caught on it, but not all of them, but I think it's a drive. And then most importantly, the government. And I think here I can also mention where development partners are important, where they can come also on the table to make sure that all the financial aspects are put together for us to develop innovative products.
Thanks, Paddy. We've certainly seen with the V20 Sustainable Insurance Facility collaboration with banks and insurance really being critical to drive solutions for MSMEs. For Jean-François, collaboration with governments, is that also something that you're focusing on, or who are the other stakeholders in your
Well, that's very key, Liesel, but I'd also say that it's more global than this. We do collaborate with governments. We have an entity called Finance Montreal, where all the banks and insurance companies are sitting with our regulators so that we establish a common, simple framework for the sustainability agenda. We have also other more local initiatives. I'm currently co-leading with the Quebec University as dean. I'm co-leading an initiative called Quebec Capital Climate, and it's actually Quebec Capital Climat. And essentially, what we're trying to do is we have a mobilization committee composed of 20 different people from 20 different sectors, including the union sector, and we're actually exchanging best practices. We want to help the city achieving its target of reducing its own emission by 45%. And it's impossible without the small, medium enterprises contribution. That will not simply happen. The Quebec City is only responsible for 6% of the carbon emissions on its directly on its in its boundaries. So we need, as business leaders, large institutions, but also small, medium enterprises who are responsible, who are accounting for more than 40% of the footprint. They need, and they have limited means. So in order to get on board, there has to be business leaders who step forward, volunteer of their time, of their energy to influence them and lead the way. And that's very critical. We're also working and endorsing a small startup called Quebec Net Positive, and their mandate is to actually help us understand what are the barriers for small, medium enterprises to get into action. And it touches them, the small, medium enterprises, like 50%, 52% of them, through a survey from Quebec Net Positive, said that they had been impacted directly or indirectly by a climate-related event in the last 12 months. 50% in the last 12 months in the province of Quebec, not in the last 12 years. So it's a major issue and everybody is concerned, and that's why we believe that we will only succeed through cross-collaboration and global mobilization.
Thank you. I mean, local action is really what adds up to global change. And so, Patrick, how does this relate to your efforts on building bridges across finance globally to drive positive change?
We can't make it without collaboration. That's, I think, understood by everyone. From a financial sector perspective, let me just go by level. If you are in charge of financial institutions and you have integrated this strategic orientation towards sustainable investing as a core part of your fiduciary duty and as a core strategic option for successful investing, I think you need to share that as much as you can with the rest of your constituency. And that's what we've tried to do in developing some of the methodologies. For instance, how do you teach correctly the notion of sustainable investing to your own clients, to your investors, is something that is of critical importance. And there shouldn't be 10 ways to do it. I mean, there are facts. You should have referentials, such as scientific references, as we heard before. And if you adopt referentials, you can share that referential with other players of the industry and then contribute to the education of investors, which at the end are the ones that will make the difference, the asset owners, in a correct way to sort of achieve what you want to achieve in sustainability and its space. That's one. Second, if you want to have a framework within which the industry can operate, it has to be pragmatical and it has to be simple. And I think the tendency, this is nature, and perhaps human nature, is to over-complexify some of those themes. Once you've started pulling on the issue of, for instance, as I said before, financial disclosure, you cannot stop willing more disclosure. But you should stop, because we all know that more is not necessarily equal to necessary. And I think in this respect, the industry can have a very fruitful discussion with its regulator. And there are jurisdictions where this is possible, and there are jurisdictions where it's less possible. In a country as small as ours, with a strong financial sector, we have the ear of our regulator when it comes to technical solutions, and we were able, for instance, in what we call the Swiss scores, to develop methodologies to see if the portfolio contributes to the reaching of the Sustainable Development Goals or not. And this is scientifically accredited, and nobody is forced to use it. But if you want to convince a client that you're doing it the right way, you better use it. And that has been an incentive that has been considered as a priority by our government, or regulator, I should say, and the regulator was wise enough to implement this optional approach. And finally, I think collaboration can be very useful also between the financial sector and the other stakeholders. Take the industry itself, the so-called real industry. If you take the industry positioning with regard to what they should publish or disclose, I think there also we should be very attentive to the fact that, you know, overloading industry with requests from the financial sector to make the right discussions will create an additional gap between the interest of one versus the other. And so we should get into collaborations with industry. And this is something also that we've tried to do here in this country by just making sure that our regulator understands that risk. And I think this is the case, and I have good hopes to see our country develop standards in this respect that will be much pragmaticer, or much more pragmatic and much more, I would say, simple than the ones that have been developed elsewhere. And this is for the benefit of accelerating the pace, not necessarily for doing it better than anyone, but accelerating the pace.
Thank you. I mean, accelerating the pace for a just transition in different jurisdictions, it really varies, I think, region to region, but exactly common frameworks are really critical. But in Africa, of course, it's a very different challenge. And Ralph, could you tell us how do you see the transition with decarbonizing portfolios while also providing energy security in developing countries? And of course, the transparency and action go hand in hand. How do you see that in your market?
It's a very delicate balance. While there's a need to decarbonize various portfolios, and there's still energy poverty within the environment that we play in. So in terms of energy, one, it's about transitioning towards renewable and green energy and supporting that through financing. Then also there's the ability for capacity building for those that will be affected, especially as they transition away from fossil-based fuels towards green energy. So you need to upskill them and provide alternatives in terms of alternative skills. So that's very important. Then also there's the part about financing energy efficiency. So helping corporates and buildings in terms of becoming more energy efficient and reducing energy consumption. In Africa, we still have challenges. And of course, you know that certain things like weather patterns are things that affect us, that basically lead towards energy poverty. So like I said, there's a delicate balance between transitioning and managing sustainable energy solutions in addressing the energy poverty. Of course, you have to work with 6 key players. We've identified 6 key players in supporting that. One is government, in terms of providing incentives towards clean energy solutions. As you know, they're pretty expensive, even though everyone advocates for them. So working with nationals and subnationals to see how we can incentivize people to adapt those technologies is important. Then, of course, we have to work with DFIs such as yourselves and World Bank and etc. in terms of getting a concessional lending that we can on-lend to those to purchase some of these solutions. And then, of course, working with private sector partners in terms of developing technology and solutions. It's important that we work with them in order to create some of these solutions. And then, of course, we have to work with the environmentalists and the social NGOs to keep us accountable and to keep us directed towards this particular goal, because we can't do it all alone. And then finally is the fintechs and innovation partners in terms of creating solutions that can help us transition as we go. Thank you.
Thank you. So I know we're over time, so 30 seconds each. Please, what would you ask each person in this room to do to drive change in through responsible banking and sustainable insurance, and also for those online in the global financial industry? What would you most like to see, starting Jean-François?
Well, actually, I see a lot of young people in this room, and trust me, with those spotlights, you all look very young, but I know there are a lot of young people in the room, and our responsibility is to ensure that we do not worsen the current situation. And this is your role as well as leaders of tomorrow to embrace that vision and carry it forward. So I'd say that you have an opportunity, a real one, a real opportunity to accomplish what my generation hasn't accomplished for you. That means, I'm not done yet, that means fostering growth, but well within the planet's limits. And that's your role. Thank you.
I'm not sure how you can top that, Ralph, but please go.
Oh, okay. For the ask would be more collaborations and partnerships. We can't do it all alone, especially in emerging markets. It's important that we leverage upon the expertise of those in developed economies, help us, guide us, lead us in terms of the journey towards sustainability in Africa. And of course, for those within the financial industry, it's about a push in adopting ESG principles so that all of us can drive the sustainable message across our landscape. I think those are the asks from us. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick, your challenge for everyone in the industry.
Well, first and foremost, keep course. We are on the right track. Don't get distracted by short-term turbulences, and make sure you focus on the low-hanging fruits. There are many where we could get clarity on what is it that we're doing and how we can measure it. And certainly, there's a need for telling more about the good examples rather than the bad ones. So fight green hushing. That will help fight greenwashing.
Thank you. Patty.
Thank you, Liesel. Being last, my ask to all of you would be, most probably everyone in this room is already converted and on the sustainable journey. So my ask is to go out here and to make sure that in the coming year, 2025 is around the corner, to make sure you convert one or two other people just to come on board on this journey. And I think it all starts with ourselves. And then also finally, I believe in collaboration and partnerships, like has been mentioned earlier. Together we can definitely build a future that's inclusive, innovative, and resilient. So let's do this together. Thank you.
Thank you. So you heard it here, stick with the vision, implement the principles, stay the course, and we'll see you at the next session. Thank you. Thank you to our panel.